Guys, now let me give an introduction about myself. I'm Sripriya here. For those who are new, I've been in the corporate training industry for nearly 18 plus years. I have trained both freshers and laterals in different corporates in Java full stack and Spring microservices. Okay, this is about me. And I have a channel called as Shristi Tech Academy, wherein I have posted few videos of Spring with Spring Boot. So you can go and watch that also. Now, let us enter into the topic. What is that we are going to learn today? We are going to understand what is Spring Boot. What is the purpose of Spring Boot? Where exactly Spring Boot is being used? Now, let us understand it. A few of you told that you know only Java. You are new to Spring. So first, let me just give a simple intro about Spring framework and then I'll move into Spring Boot. See guys, you are very comfortable developing applications with Java. With Java, you can create standalone applications. That is console-based applications. The output will be shown in the console, or if you are using any GUI, the output will be shown in the GUI. With Java, using JSP and servlets, you can develop web applications. Okay, this was the scenario before 2003. So we were using Java. On top of it, we have JSP servlets. So Java has something called as JEE, Java Enterprise Edition, which had JSP and servlets and EJB, with the help of which we can develop web applications, enterprise applications. What is the disadvantage of doing this? When you are working with these kind of with JEE, your components are tightly coupled. So in 2003, one guy came up with the concept of Spring. Spring is an open source framework. It helps to develop loosely coupled applications. Loosely coupled applications. Guys, the best example to understand about a loosely coupled application is the applications are not connected. I mean, whenever you are writing classes, the classes are not connected to each other. Say, for example, I have class A or class M student. Student class has an instance of address. Understand this? Student is a separate class, address is a separate class. Okay, student is an instance of address. Now, what I need actually when I'm creating a student object, I have to create an address object and inject address into student object. This is the scenario. If you are doing it as a Java application, as a Java developer, you have to explicitly create the Java object address object and inject it into student object. So this is what you have to do. This can be achieved with the help of setter methods or you can do it with constructor. But with Spring framework, you don't have to do this. Whatever dependencies are needed for a class, all the dependencies will be injected automatically to the appropriate object. In our case, address object will be injected into student. How? Using setter method or constructor based dependency injection. This is the flow. This is the scenario. I hope it is clear. Now, let me explain why actually we are going in for Spring Boot. Guys, I want you to go through what is an IOC container, what is dependency injection, what are the two types of dependency injection. Now, let me explain what is Spring Boot. When I go to many places, when I say that I mean we are going to learn Spring, then people ask why not Spring Boot? Why Spring? Spring is the framework with the help of which you are going to develop all your applications. Spring Boot is just a tool which makes your application development using Spring very easier. Like how? If you are, say, for example, I told you Spring is a level above of Java, means Spring is a framework, Java is the technology. For Spring, you are using only Java. It helps to develop loosely coupled applications. It means whatever dependencies are needed will be injected automatically. We don't have to create the objects. See, it is something like how you are using a wireless mouse, a wireless a wireless keyboard, a wireless earphones. Similar to that, it is not tightly coupled. And again, your charger. Anybody can come and charge in their phone in your charger, provided it is a C pin. Correct? So all these say that they are all loosely coupled. Tightly coupled means what? If I am sitting in front of the desktop, it is mandatory that I am locked to that place. I cannot carry my desktop from one place to another place. But in case of laptop, this is not the scenario. It means that it supports loose coupling. I hope it is clear till this part. Now, let us understand why actually we are using Spring Boot for developing Spring applications. See, in the last week, we have seen how to develop Spring applications. So for that, we have used Maven. Maven is the project management tool. So suppose, say, if I have to create a Spring application, then I need to select the project management tool. It can be Maven or Gradle. Then I need to decide on the Java version. Then I have to add the dependencies. Suppose, say, the application is integrated to the database. I want to create it as a REST API. So I need to add the appropriate dependencies. I need to add the dependencies for REST API. I need to add the dependency for the database, that is MySQL connector. Then if I'm working with JDBC, then I need to add the JDBC module, Spring JDBC module. All these explicitly, I need to go to the browser, search for this and add it to my application. This is how this is how we usually do in Spring. Number one, if you are using Spring Boot is just a tool which helps to develop Spring applications which are ready to run. Suppose, say, I am coming home hungry. Like what I want is, like, assume in my house I have bread. I want to make a sandwich. So explicitly I have to go to the kitchen, do everything that is needed to make a sandwich. What then? This is very tougher task. Suppose if I'm having an app like a delivery app, what I will do? I'll go and search the sandwich I want. I will order it. It will come to me as a ready-made one. Maybe I can reheat it and I can use it. Similar to that is your Spring Boot. Spring Boot is a tool which helps to develop Spring applications which are ready to run without any fuss. If I want to add the dependencies, in case of Spring Maven, I have to go to the browser. I have to search one by one dependency. Guys, I have done it actually. Before Spring Boot in 2015, 2016, we go and add the dependencies one by one, select it in the browser and we come and add it. What about Spring Boot? In case of Spring Boot, it automatically opens a window. Say, let me just show you. So the moment you give start.spring.io, it opens Spring Initializer. It helps to pick and choose the dependencies. So just like how you go to the app and you select, okay, I want a sandwich, I want a juice. You just go and select the menu. From the menu, you just tick mark whatever items you want, add it to the cart and you pay for it. Similarly, whatever dependencies you want, you can add the dependencies over here. What is the version of Java you want? What is the version of Spring Boot you want? What is the project management tool that you are going to use? You can pick and choose whatever you need and then click generate. Automatically, your application will be generated. So, Spring Boot helps to add third-party libraries without any fuss. Very easily. Okay. Now, the next part. Suppose with the help of Spring, if I am developing a web application, then I know that I need a Tomcat server. So I have to go to the browser, download the Tomcat server, even if I'm going to create a REST API. But in case of Spring Boot, it knows that suppose if you have added WebBus dependency in your application, in pom.xml, you have added Spring WebBus dependency. The moment you add WebBus dependency, Spring Boot understands that you are going to create a MVC application or a REST API. So it provides support for embedded Tomcat server. Embedded Tomcat server. Now, if you are going to work on an application where you are going to provide authentication for your application, what is the meaning of authentication? It will expect you to enter the username and password. In the database, it will go and check whether you are a registered user or not. So for that, we have to work with security module. In case of security module, if you have not provided any type of authentication, Like say, for example, I want to authenticate by the username and password that I have given in the application, or I have to check in the database. If I have not provided any mechanism, by default, Spring Security will help to automatically it will help you with a username with user. The username will be user, and it will auto generate the password for you. Okay, so this is the third part. Next, suppose if I am going to work with a database, data-jpa, Spring understands that, Spring Boot understands that, okay, this lady is going to create an application which is connected to the database. So if I forget to add MySQL connector, Spring framework, now I don't have any opportunity to add any database in my system. So Spring provides by default an in-memory database which is called as H2 database. So Spring Framework helps to add all the third-party libraries without any difficulty. In case of Spring, if you are going to develop it using Maven, then explicitly you need to go and add all this. For web application, you need to explicitly add Tomcat. Okay. What is needed for Spring? If you are working in a Spring application, the first step is you need a IOC container, inversion of control container. So for the IOC container, we are having two things. One is application context. The other one is bean factory. These two are the IOC container. If you are using a Maven project, explicitly you need to create the IOC container for your application. But if you are working with Spring Boot is responsible for creating the IOC container for you. I hope it is clear. So Spring Boot is a tool which helps to develop your Spring applications. That is, which helps to create Spring applications which are ready to run. That is, which are ready to run. The moment the application is created, you can run the application. You don't have to go and add some configuration, this, that, nothing is required. But in case of Maven, it is not like that. You create a Spring application, you have to pick and choose the dependencies. Okay. Number two, Spring Boot helps to add all the third-party libraries very easily without any problem. You just go and add the dependencies, tick, 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 all the dependencies that are needed for your application that you are creating. Based on the dependency that you have added, if you have added web, it will automatically add embedded Tomcat server. If you have added security, it will automatically create a username with the name user and auto-generate the password. Guys, remember, if you have not given your configuration, if you have given configuration, it will understand, okay, fine, she will take care of the authentication. In case of data-jpa, it has an in-memory database so that like you don't have to download and install any database for working with it. Okay, this is done. Now, what are the other things? Other than the third one is in case of Spring Framework, in case of Spring Boot will automatically create the IOC container. I don't have to create the IOC container. Spring Boot is responsible for creating the IOC container. So, in a nutshell, if you are going to talk about Spring Boot, what are the things that it is going to do? It supports adding dependencies, whatever dependencies are needed for your application. Then it supports guys, can you hear me now? Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Oh, okay, thank you. So number two, it supports, that is, it enables auto configuration. What is the meaning of enabling auto configuration? Guys, this is a very important question. Usually, wherever you go, they ask this question. What is the advantage of using Spring Boot? Remember, can I learn Spring Boot without understanding Spring Framework? No. You should have a basic understanding of Spring Framework. You should know what is IOC container, what is dependency injection, What are the two types of dependency injection? What is the meaning of scope? Then you jump into Spring Boot. Spring Boot is just a tool which helps to create all these applications. Which provides all these support. It helps to create your Spring application very easily. That's all. See, earlier if I want to take water, I have to go to the well and draw water, or I need to go to the river. Now I can just open the tap, I get the water directly. So it doesn't mean that tap is separate or well is separate. Both of them are going to give me water. This one gives me the water in an easier manner. That is the difference. Okay. Now let me open my PPT. So first, let us get an introduction to what is Spring Boot. And then we will understand what is the meaning of Spring Boot starter packages. Then we will create a simple Spring Boot application. Okay. So already, as I told you, Spring Boot helps to bootstrap a Spring application which is just ready to run. You can just run the application. You don't have to, after creating the application, you don't have to go and do anything. All the dependencies needed for your application, while creating the application itself, you will go and select it. So you can add third-party libraries without much fuss. Okay. How do you run a Java application? You can run it as right-click, run as Java application if you are using Eclipse, or you can create a jar file. You can package your application, create a jar file. Java RQ file. Similarly, in case of Spring also, you can create a jar file and run the jar file. Spring Boot has command line interface with the help of which you can run Spring scripts. Guys, remember, people first actually they think with Spring Boot I can create only REST APIs. No, it is not like that. With Spring Boot, I can create standalone applications, that is console-based applications. Today, that's what we are going to see. Then web applications, that is which is going to run in the browser. Then REST APIs, which is also enterprise application. So with Spring Boot, you can create all these three. Remember, when I say Spring Boot is just supporting what actually internally I'm using, Spring Framework. Spring Framework is made of what technology? Java. So technically, you have to be strong in Java to understand Spring. If you notice, whatever code you are seeing in Spring, 99% it is Java. But the annotations, the inbuilt classes, all that we are using from Spring Framework. Okay. Now, what is the advantage of Spring Boot? It provides a faster and accessible experience of all the development. And again, as I told you, with Spring Boot provides embedded Tomcat servers. What that already I told you, embedded Tomcat server. It provides security, metrics, health checks. What is the meaning of it? I have created a REST API. I want to know what are all the mappings, what is the authentication endpoint, and what is the health of my application, whether the application is up and running or not. How many instances are running? If I want to know that, all that can be achieved with the help of Spring Boot. So this is very important. And the third one, it doesn't support any code generation. It is not going to generate any code for you. It is not a code generating tool. It is a tool which provides a complete support. That the moment I add something, it understands that it provides the logic for that also. Okay. And it doesn't need any XML configuration. Okay. One important thing, let me just go back to that. So, it supports automatic dependency management. Pick and choose the dependencies from the application console, just like how I have told. Second, it provides embedded Tomcat server. Third, it enables auto configuration. Enables auto configuration is very important concept in case of Spring Boot. Automatically configure your database, configure your Tomcat server, configure your authentication. That is what is called as enabling auto configuration. Number 4, automatic dependency. It helps to get the metrics of your application. Metrics, health check of your application. And the last one, it also provides externalized configuration. Guys, actually, we have just started with Spring Boot. Usually, when you are working in any application, if you have worked with JDBC. So what you need to do, you have to give the username, password, URL to which database you are connecting. Where can you give? You can give it programmatically in your application, or you can give it in a separate properties file. You create a properties file, you add the details in a properties file. From your Java application, you should read the properties file. Similarly, when you are working with Spring Boot, you don't have to give the configuration details in the properties file. Instead, you will create a separate properties file. You will add the properties file to a repository. Say, for example, GitHub repository. Now, from your Spring Boot application, you can retrieve the properties file from this GitHub repository. It means I am not having anything confined to my application. Suppose say the username is root. Later on, they are changing the username and password. Then my application will break. Or if the database name is Academy DB, later on they are changing the database to some other DB. Then again my code will break. Instead, if it is available in GitHub, everybody can access the same properties file. So these are few advantages of Spring Boot. Let me open it again. Here, see. Simpler management, dependency management, default auto configuration, embedded web server. It provides application metrics and health checks. Together with that, advanced externalized configuration. Okay. What are the other things? Suppose say, guys, one other important thing that you need to know, if you want to work with Spring, if you are creating a simple console-based application, the dependencies that you need are Spring context. The moment you add context, internally it will add core. Dependencies means, guys, the jar files. If you are working with MySQL, you need to add MySQL driver to your application, right? Similarly, if you are working with Spring, not Spring Boot, I'm not talking about Spring Boot. If you are working with Spring, you need to add certain dependencies, context, core, expression language, AOP. All these are for console-based application. That is standalone application. Suppose if you are going to work with web application, then you need to add Spring Web as dependency. Suppose if you are working with database, then you need Spring JDBC module or Spring Data-jpa module. Okay, so this is how you add it to your application in case of Spring. In case of Spring Boot, you can go and select the dependencies all by yourself. Let me show you here. Now, this is the dependencies. Now, if I want to create a web application, then I can go and search for web. See Spring Web module. And again, if I want to work with JDBC, then I can search for JDBC. Spring Data JDBC. Then H2 database. I told you already, H2 database is an inbuilt database. Similarly, if I want to work with security, I can just go and search for security. Guys, this is not Spring Boot. These are modules which are available in Spring framework. These modules are embedded inside Spring Boot starter packages. That is, in case of Spring Boot, you have some starter packages, something like Spring Boot Starter Data-jpa. What it will have? Internally, it will have Spring JDBC module, Spring Data-jpa module. If I add Spring Boot Starter Data Couchbase, internally it will have Spring module, Spring Couchbase module. And if I add Data REST, internally it will have Spring Web module. So please understand, in case of Spring Boot, all these are called a Spring Boot Starter package. Okay, I will tell it in a very simpler manner. Suppose say you want to become fit. You are going to a gym. So if you are going to the gym and if you are going to do the, do the training with the equipments which is already available there, it is simple Spring framework. Now when you go to the gym, they are telling that you have got separate packages. 3 months package wherein so many types of fitness workouts are there. Zumba workout, yoga, then personal trainer. Then together with that, we will provide you diet plan. What it is? It is a combination of so many things put together. Correct? Similarly, in case if you talk about Spring, it is having separate Spring JDBC module, Spring Web module, Spring Data-jpa module, and so on. But if you talk about Spring Boot Starter, What it is? If I say Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, internally it is having Spring Data JPA module, Spring Core module. It's like a package. Everything is like individual packages. That is how it is. These are called as Spring application starters. Spring Boot application starters. Okay. Now, directly let us try creating an application. I will tell you how the application will look like. What is the annotation that you need to understand? Now, okay, so this is my, so how do you create and work with Spring Boot? Spring Boot, if you want to work in a simple Spring application, last week we worked with Eclipse, or you can use IntelliJ or Notepad++, because there you are creating just a Maven project and you are going and adding the dependencies. What about Spring Boot? If you want to work with Spring Boot, either you can use IntelliJ or you can work with Spring Toolsuite. Now let me show you how to create a simple Spring Boot application. Guys, this is a standalone application, meaning to say that the output will be coming only in the console. It is not a REST API. Okay, let us get started. File, new, Spring Starter project. Okay, see, guys, it is the same start.spring.io. There are 3 different ways of developing a Spring application. One is, sorry, actually 2 different ways. One is you open Spring Toolsuite, just like how I have opened. You select Spring Starter project. So automatically it will open the initializer, Spring initializer. Okay, this is one way. Or go to the browser. In the browser, you have to add start.spring.io. You need to type start.spring.io. So automatically it will open the initializer. You pick and choose the dependencies. Then you simply give generate. What it will do? It will automatically generate your Spring Boot application. Number 3, if you are using IntelliJ, IntelliJ Community Edition doesn't have support for Spring Starter project. Sometimes if you can search for a plugin, you may get it. If you do not get it, you have to go to the browser, generate the application, download the application, and import it as a Maven project. So which one is easier? The easier one is using Spring Toolsuite, because automatically it provides support. Let me open it. You can see the difference. See, this is the Spring Starter project. Same thing. Let me open the browser. In the browser also you can see the same flow. The project management tool, the language that you are using, the Spring Boot version, and what is the group ID. If you have worked with Maven last week, we have done. So what is the group ID? What is the artifact ID? What is the package name? So all that, whatever you have seen over here is available here also. See. So this is way too easier. Okay. Now let us check it out. Exactly. Please understand, you need to have a basic understanding of Spring before jumping into Spring Boot. Please do not directly start with Spring Boot. If you are going to gym, you start with the basic workouts and then only you'll start lifting weights, right? Directly, you will not go and lift you will not go and do a deadlift. Initially, you'll start with 1 kg, 2 kg, then only you'll increase the level. Similar to that, first, please understand the basic concepts of Spring. Spring Boot uses only Spring. Spring uses technology Java. So you should be good in Java to do Spring. Okay. Now, let us see this. So here, I should give an application name. The application name should be in 3 different words. It should be in camel, not in camel case, but snake case. That is a hyphen in between. Let me give it a Spring hyphen boot hyphen basic. Type. What is the project management tool that we want to use? It is Maven. Packaging is jar. I want to package this application. I want to package this application as a jar file. What is the Java version? 17. Yeah, because we are working with the latest version of Spring Boot. That is Spring Boot version greater than 3.x. Language is Java. What about the group ID? The group ID is like suppose you have created a jar file, you want to deploy your application. So this is the folder in which your application will be added. That is the jar file will be added. So that is this group ID. Package name is just like what name that you give for your application. Just like in Java, you have a package, right? Same thing. So here I will give it as com.example. Click next. Now see the Spring Boot version. The Spring Boot version increases every week. Like they create versions, then they make it as a stable version, then they move on to create the next version by removing the existing bugs, adding new features. So I would suggest if you are working with Spring Boot, try to choose the version which is 3.1.11, not lesser than 3.x. Try to use 3.1.11 and don't go beyond that, like 3.2.5. If you don't have any option, you select the option that is given over here. After you have created the application, you should downgrade yourself to the lower version. So here it is 3.1.11. Okay. Now, see here, as I told, all the dependencies are there. Just for our understanding, this time alone, let me select web. Usually for working with a basic application, we don't need any dependency. But for our understanding purpose, I have selected web as dependency. Okay, click next. And click finish. So this is how you create a Spring Boot application. Please understand, Spring Boot is just a tool which helps to develop your Spring applications which are ready to run. Using Spring Boot, the work is made easier. All the 5 points that I have told, that is about Spring Boot. Now, how to create a Spring Boot? I have shown it with the IntelliJ. Sorry, with the Spring tool soup. Now the application is getting created. You can see it at the bottom. Yeah. Let me open the application. Guys, this is like a Maven project only. So it will have pom.xml. It will have like SRC main Java, SRC main resources. Whatever you do in Maven, same thing only. But the only advantage is in pom.xml, it has added all the dependencies that are needed for our application. Okay, now the application is created. Let me open it. I'll open pom.xml. See, this is my pom.xml. Last week, I don't know, people who have learned together with me. In pom.xml, we went and added the dependencies. But now you see the Spring Boot version. As I told you, if you have got a version which is greater than 3.2, then you create it like that. Then after that, come and change the version over here. That is very important. Okay. And then the next part. What is the version of Java? It is 17. Should be 17 or greater than 17. Because 3.x supports only 17. And we have not added any dependencies. By default, Spring has added the dependency. Together with that, this application will create the main class also. Let me open this src main Java com.example Spring Boot basic application. See, note, let me show you. It has created a main class. The main class is annotated with @Spring Boot application. This is an annotation. Okay. Before understanding about this annotation, let us see what is there in pom.xml. Let me open pom.xml. In pom.xml, we have added the dependencies. Let me click on this. See, this is simply given as Spring Boot starter. What exactly is there in the Spring Boot starter? This is a starter package. This package will have so many items. Just like as I told you, if I go to a gym, they give me a package. The package has got some play, then just like a cult package where you have got some place, you can go and play shuttlecock or do swimming. And then you have got some fitness items, yoga, then everyday classes, then what is that here, Zumba workout, then with a treadmill, all that they are giving it as a package, then diet, all put together. Similarly, for this Spring Boot starter package, what is available? Let me click on dependency hierarchy. See, this is my package Spring Boot starter. Internally, what it is having? Spring Boot, which contains Spring Core. Spring Core is our Spring basic. See, the Spring Boot version is 3.1.11. The Spring version is 6.2. Got it? Spring version that you are using is 6.0. Spring Boot is 3.11. It has got Spring Core, Spring Context, Spring AOP, all the dependencies that are needed. These are all modules which are available. It is added to your application. Now, Let me okay, let me go back to the main class. This class is annotated with Spring Boot application. This is a combination of three different annotations. What are they? Let me click on the Spring Boot application. It's a combination of enable auto configuration. What is the meaning of it? Automatically configure the required dependencies based on the, automatically configure the classes based on the dependencies that are added. If the person has added security, configure the username and password. If the person has added web module, configure the embedded Tomcat server. So enable auto configuration. Next one is add component scan. This also we have seen last week. If the hierarchy is different, I can specify to which packages it has to go and look for all the classes. Then the third one, Spring Boot configuration. Actually, I have to click it here at configuration. This is for Java based configuration. Guys, this you will understand once you are learning Java based configuration only. That is, if I want to, if I want Spring to create an object for my class, I need to annotate the class with that component. I will repeat. In case of Spring framework, in case of Spring applications, we never create objects for our application. All the objects needed for our application will be created by Spring framework. That is the IOC container. These Java objects are called as Spring beans. So now, what I should tell? I have to inform in which package all my classes are available. If I give com.example, it will go inside com.example and sub packages of com.example just to check where the, just to check where the classes are there, which are annotated with at component annotation. So it will create objects for that. Suppose if I am having two different package structure, one is com.example, the other one is com.training. So explicitly, I have to use that component scan annotation. I have to give both the package name so that the IOC container will scan both the packages. It will scan com.example, also it will scan com.training. And it will select all the classes that are annotated with at component. It will create the Java objects. These Java objects are called as Spring beans. So at Spring Boot application is a combination of enable auto configuration, at configuration and component scan. Okay. Now what is the next step? Now I want to create a simple class. Okay, sorry. And now I want to know how the IOC container is getting created. Here I have got Spring application.run. Let me keep the cursor over here. You are calling the static method of Spring application. Let me keep the cursor over here. Here you can notice we are creating an appropriate application context. It means this method is responsible for creating an IOC container for us. Guys, we don't have to create it. The IOC container also will be created by Spring Boot. That is the best part. Okay. Now, after creating it, what if I want to run my application in the console? So for that, it provides support for command line properties. So see here, trigger any command line runner. So how to create that we will see now. Before that, let us create a simple employee class. Right click, new class. Class is employee. Let me give the package name as com.example.beans and click finish. Let me add two instance variables. Private string, emp name, private double salary, and go to source, generate getter and setters. Select all and generate toString. We need to assign values for this. So either you can use properties file. We don't have time. So directly I will give hard-coded values. At value annotation. Above the setter method, add at value annotation and pass the name. Above the setter method. At value annotation. Though the value is given in within double quotes, automatically it will be converted into double. Okay. And this class should be annotated with at component annotation. Okay. Now, I want to print this employee object. So how to get the employee object? I cannot create the employee object like employee is equal to new employee. Spring framework has to give me the employee object. So because automatically it will create the object, I have to retrieve the object from Spring. So for that, we are going to run this application in the command line. So explicitly make your class implement command line runner. Implements command line runner. And let me, oh, this is a functional interface. That is an interface which is having only one method. I need to override the method. Yeah. Inside this, I have to write the code. So can I write employee is equal to new employee? No, because the employee object is already created. And what I should get the employee object from the IOC container. I have not created the IOC container also here. In the previous case, when you are working with Maven, explicitly you created the IOC container, but here your IOC container is already created. I need to retrieve the value from the IOC container. So how it can be done? So for that, first step is I can auto wire the IOC container. The IOC container is nothing but the application context. Application context. Okay. Now, how to retrieve the Spring beans from the IOC container? The method is context.getBean. We have done it last week. Application context.getBean by passing the bean name. What is the bean name? The bean name is the class name in lowercase. So I can give it as employee, comma, to which class it belongs. It is employee.class. The return type is an employee object. The next line, I can print the employee object. Okay. Together with that, I also want to know what are all the beans created by this IOC container. Okay, fine. I have one class which is annotated with that component. It has created the object for that class. Is there any other object created by this container? So for that, we are going to use a method called application context dot get bean definition names. The return type is a string array. Because there are more than one bean created by the IOC container. String beans is equal to application context dot get bean definition names. It's an array. Now let us iterate through it. If you are familiar with the streams, you can use the methods of streams also. I'll use for each. Print the bean object. Okay. Now our application is ready. See how simple it is. If I'm doing it with Maven, first create the Maven project, then go to the browser, pick and choose the dependencies, add the dependencies. After adding the dependencies, update the project. If you are using a different Java version, change the Java version. Then after that, you need to come and add, create the IOC container in the main class. And then from the IOC container, you need to get the beans. But now we have not done anything of that sort. The IOC container is already created. The dependencies are already added. As a Java developer, it is my duty. I have to just get the beans that are created by the IOC container. We don't need the IOC container also. For the first time, I'm just showing it to you with that. Okay, let me click. How to run this application? Select your file, main class, right click, run as. You can run it as Java application or Spring Boot app. Both will work same manner only. Spring Boot app. Okay. Let me scroll up the console. Okay. It is giving me an error because of the Java version that I'm having. Let me modify it. See how I am modifying it. Select your project, right click, build path, configure build path. Go to libraries, JRE, edit. Alternate JRE. I need to add a new JRE. Standard VM. Click next. If you are doing it as a fresh one, you don't need to do it. C drive, program files, Java, JDK. finish. Now you select this JDK, not JRE. Apply, apply and close. Now here you have to select JDK 17. Okay, and click finish. Apply and close. Now again, let me run the application. Select my class, right click, run as Java application. Both will work perfectly fine. Now the application has started. You can see, let me scroll up to the top. See, the moment the application starts, it comes with the logo of Spring Boot. And it shows that how the application has started in which machine. Can you see this? And all these are logger statements. Then after that, we are trying to print the employee object. It is printing the employee object. Then it is showing all the beans that are created by the IOC container. See here, internal configuration annotation processor. Employee is our bean. Spring Boot basic application is a class. So these are the objects created by the IOC container. See how many objects it has created. Technically speaking, these are the classes. I capital internal configuration annotation processor. The object of the class will be in camel case. That's what they have given over here. Okay. Fine. Now, but usually remember, you are not supposed to auto-wire your application context. That is wrong. That is a wrong approach. What bean I want? I want the employee bean. So I can directly go on auto-wire employee object. Employee. Now I don't have to use this line. Directly I can print the employee object. And this also we don't have to do. See, when I'm working with an application, I need an object of employee service, IMPL. I need an object of employee. I need an object of book. So who is creating it? All that are created by the IOC container. Okay. So the IOC container, who is creating the IOC container? Spring Boot creates the IOC container. The IOC container creates all the objects that are needed for our application. You are just going to use the the objects. In Java, what do you do? Wherever you want, you create an object and you use the object to call the methods. Here, you never ever create an object. The objects are created only by Spring framework. That is by the IOC container. Let me save it and run the application. I'll run it from here. Now see how nicely it is giving me the output. Is it clear? So I have just shown you how to create a very basic application using Spring Boot. Spring Boot is the best tool for developing MVC applications, REST APIs, microservices. For my working with microservices and all, it is very easy. What is the more advantage of this? If, say, for example, in Spring, I am trying to get a dependency A depends on B depends on C. So it means it is my duty, I have to pick and choose A, B, and C. But if I am working with Spring Boot, it is enough that I choose A. I go out to the browser and I pick and choose the dependencies, right? I select A. Internally, Spring Boot will know that A depends on B depends on C. So automatically it will take all the dependencies. That's what has happened, right? In pom.xml, we have not added anything. We have just added the dependency what we need. The moment you add it, automatically here, Spring Boot starter depends on Spring Boot. Spring Boot depends on Spring Core. Spring Boot depends on Spring Context. Context depends on AOP. AOP depends on Bean. Whatever dependencies are there, all there are automatically added. Logging, we have not added at all. Spring Boot starter depends on logging, auto configure, start. Can you see this? So these are all the direct dependencies of Spring Boot starter. So whatever interrelated dependencies are there, they will be added automatically. Any questions? Is this clear? Yeah. So I hope it is clear. Actually, in 1 week, we will do a project using the Spring Boot so that you will get a better clarity of how actually a Spring Boot application is working. Fine. Okay. So guys, those who are, those who are new to Spring Boot, those who have not learned Java at Spring at all, I would suggest you please watch the previous two webinars where I have explained in a very easier manner what is IOC, what is dependency injection. We have done few examples also. Three webinars we have done. One is about basic Spring framework. The second one is about dependency injection. The third one is about auto wiring. If you can understand auto wiring, it means that you can understand Spring. Then the next level is Spring Boot. Now, once you have learned Spring Boot, whatever you have learned in Maven, we will try it out in Spring Boot in the upcoming sessions. Okay. So I hope the session was useful. Can we wind up? Okay. So you can just go and search. My channel name is Shristi Tech Academy. Let me just show you to you. From here only, I'll just show you so that. So last week we have done it. I have added three webinars. Webinar 1, 2, and 3. You can watch that. It is available there. And this also I will upload it to YouTube tomorrow. So you can watch that. What is the introduction to Spring in dependency injection, and also the third one. I have added the third one also. This one, auto wiring. So please go through that. You will get an idea. And then once you have understood this, then you can move on for the next topic. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, actually we can do that. Yeah, sure. See, I have created a very nice application. You can let me show you here. And this one. That is my playlist. I will just show you. And this one. This is the one in which like I have created an end-to-end application with all the topics. Like how to create a, what is it? How to create a microservice, then how to connect to the database, how to perform, see, these are the topics. See. Create an application setup, add the interfaces, then implement the methods, add derived queries, add the REST endpoints, then add the exceptions, deploy it using Docker, and test the application using Postman. The whole thing is available as such. If you are interested and you can go through that, one point of time, of course, we will see how to create a REST API using Spring framework, Spring Boot. Maybe in the next 1 or 2 sessions, we will deal with that. Okay? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for your time.